Okay, let's climb some stairs. Why not? Why did I turn the camera on there? I don't know. It felt right. Here we are, 1807, Nations in Arms. Game is really disappointing me in a lot of ways. We have, over the last, the first year Napoleon made an abortive attack into Britain that I screwed up and didn't do well. Didn't make it a plausible attack is essentially what happened. And the Grand Army was caught there. The British Navy's cut him off from supply. However, Austria and Russia saw this as an opportunity to steal land from Prussia. So at the beginning of 1806, they basically forced Britain into taking the coalition out of war with France and into war with Prussia. Prussia then surrendered, giving up everything that Austria and Russia really wanted, and agreed to join them in a coalition, attacked France, and then at the end of the 1806 winter, came to a peace with France where Prussia got Hanover out of it, which they need, and they ended up taking Holland as well, just as sort of a side benefit, but got out of the war again and are now more likely to be a pro-French ally, at least for a while. They can't permanently because they are one of the countries that needs to defeat France to get an automatic victory. And everybody this early in the game is still looking and gunning for automatic victories. Which may be a mistake, but if you can get one, it makes sense. And they have to basically reclaim, at the very least, Masovia from Russia, Warsaw, as well as they would like to get Saxony back from the Austrians, a minor that the Austrians have allied to them now. So they bailed from the war with kind of vague agreements to France of, look, you know, if you can turn this war around and beat the Russo-Austrian army with what you got, I'm probably joining in, which was enough, along with removing the Prussian army from the threat that the French have facing them, to convince them to accept giving up Hanover. Over here, we forgot about this. Portugal is conquered by Spain. How does Spain feel about that? I forgot to handle that during my period of conquests. Portugal is definitely conquered by Spain. There's a couple of sides I could take for that. One is I could just take it as mine and use its income. Another is I can grab it as a minor ally, which I think is the better choice for me. And we look for the Brits. These are Portuguese. These are Portuguese. I don't see an easy way for Britain to defend Portugal against the Spanish attack early on. We tried to push them back into the war with an invasion using Swedish fleets and whatnot. It's really tough. If Spain wants Portugal, they should be able to get it. And historically, I don't think they were able to get it. I think the Portuguese kind of held out on their own, although there may have been some British forces there. I have no idea of what happened there. I do know that Spain was at war on the side of France, and Portugal was a British ally, and that kind of says that Spain should have been able to force their way in. All right, Anyway, that's where we are at the beginning of 1807. I go dancing tonight, so I won't be back up here. But, you know, maybe Saturday, maybe Sunday. I don't have raid anymore, so whatever. Before we start looking at 1807, it's Sunday, getting close to midday. Would have been fine coming up here yesterday, but I have damaged myself so much in dancing on Friday. It was hard to make it up here today. Not like overly tired. I got a good night's sleep in afterwards. Not like overly drunk. Just the physical damage to my legs and whatnot. Plus, that one injury had me worried, and another one does, and everything's like coming together and making it very hard to do anything. Unfortunately, weather's getting hot again. I'm not well enough to go shopping today in terms of like my legs. I don't know if I will be all week, to be honest. And I really should be. May have to make another stop. Do something that's not a heavy shopping. Maybe go to the same supermarket but get breads and stuff like that. I don't know. But yeah, not in good shape. Anyway, about ready to do the event cards as the next thing, so let's get to it and see what we draw. There's this huge bloody deck, right? And I'm still trickling cards in, so I have to reshuffle it every time, even though nothing ever gets reshuffled back into it. Nothing got played, but, well, Nelson got played. The French got a handful of them. One, not a public event. Play once, gives Britain 30 pounds. Never going to see the light of day. And then this diet, which I probably will play, a minor power reverts to neutral. Again, this is a remove from play, reverts to neutral status on a 3 through 6. I see no reason why these would be this would be a one-time play, or this one actually. Both of them are kind of like, yeah, I could see those happening multiple times, and given how unlikely it is that any card ever comes back, it seems, silly to remove these from the deck. Especially the diet, which is just a way to shake loose a neutral. Not sure what I would choose to shake loose. Sweden is probably the best option right now. France, I have Treaty of Tilsit. I could, as far as I can tell, knock Austria out of the war. That doesn't really do me much good, though. They'd just be neutral for a couple of years. Given that I just made an alliance with Prussia, it doesn't really make sense. It's better used on the Russians, as historically. I'm looking for any of these others that I might want to play. I just don't pay attention. I have such a big handful of cards. I end up not paying much attention to them. Let's see what the Brits drew. Free passage. Okay, go through a neutral minor. And a harem. This is a public. If Turkey's at war, it now becomes neutral. This is a public event. I have to play this. Now, I might not have to play it right now, but it's going to be played for essentially no effect because Turkey's not at war. If another public event comes out, I can delay that one. Prussia just drew a public event, but this isn't going to block that one because it's Prussia's not part of the coalition anymore, so I think they just play theirs on their own. Russia's going to have to send forces off to Persia for a foreign war. Put that one face up too. It has to be played. And an interesting combination. The Bayonne trap came up under Austria, so that's going to be able to block the Turkish one from being fired off right away. This is weird. If no war of liberation has begun and Spain is allied to France, France can now enter Spain. Okay, great. Also, French leader Joseph and 2 infantry steps are deployed in Bayonne. If Spain is neutral, Spain becomes a French ally. Okay. Great. I don't see any reason I want French troops to enter Spain. And Dos de Mail, playable if Bayonne Trap has been played or if French combat steps are inside Spain. This is not a public event, and Turkey's holding it. It's a key event in the Napoleonic period, right? Spain becomes a British ally and a war of liberation begins immediately according to the rules. Neat. The Turks are holding this thing which switches Spain's allegiance. I think the whole Spanish thing is probably destroyed by this. Now, the War of Liberation, we looked at this earlier. An instability check has to have happened. Which, as far as I can tell, that's this. Which I think maybe you can... During each diplomacy phase, when Spain is allied to another major power, she can be the target of a diplomacy. I'm guessing Spanish instability can actually take place. The instability check can take place during, even with Spain as a player. But anyway, Turkey's not going to instigate it. So that there is some chance over time. And again, cards may not come up from the deck. They may end up, but in this case, they may end up in a player's hands who's never going to play them. I can't see Turkey switching Spain's allegiance. If anything, they probably want Spain allied with France. Now, maybe, no, it switches it to British ally. Yeah. Yeah. And does Britain have a say in this? Spain doesn't, I guess. In a multiplayer game, Britain may not want to be allied with Spain. So it's like, there's all kind of effects in these cards that are like, yeah, they work in the 2-player game, sure. Or if Spain's neutral or whatever, maybe the game holds up in, 4 or 5. But once you get to that 6 and 7 players, I feel like things are getting pretty weird. All right. I got to figure out the ordering, although it may not be that important, of how the public events get played. Now, there is one thing you can do with cards. Like if you have a card that you don't really want, but maybe somebody else does, you can sell it. The price is freely negotiated. This might be a way around the money loaning rules. But then again, so might the Entente be. I don't know. I think the Entente actually restricts it. But in the Entente, you can basically sell territory. So I don't know. I'm struggling to find a rule that I know exists, which is that each block can only play one public event. I know it exists, I just don't know where to find it. I wasn't able to find it in the event cards here. Oh, here we go, here we go. In bold even. Yeah. If you do not play a multiplayer game. Wait, what? The public events with the notation must be played and revealed immediately at a rate of 1 public event per block per turn, means season, if you do not play a multiplayer game. Okay. I'm gonna leave it at the same because, and let the block vote on which card that they play, because it just triggers things all wrong. And I thought every spring turn, each Allied major power except Spain and Turkey provides a one-card draw to France or Britain. A multiplayer game, each major power played by a physical player, draw one event card whether this power is at war or not. I don't know. I think I'm going to still limit the public events because otherwise you have them all just flush out. The Persia one, I'm saying the Russians are going to be allowed to build troops to send there. Again, you know, is that what I want to do, or do I want to be able to pull from anywhere on the force? You know, it doesn't make a lot of sense that units, that forces over in Western Europe would be the ones sent. For the Bayonne Trap, supposedly, I get Joseph and 2 infantry steps, I guess for free, deployed in Bayonne. Now, Joseph's a problem because he doesn't come in until, I think, 1809. I can't fucking read these things. That's an 1808. And we're in 1807. I'm trumping him in. But again, like, should he be? Should he not be? I don't know. He's not bracketed. If he were bracketed, he would only come in from the card. I don't think there's anything else of importance in this one. So it goes, I guess, to the used pile, but it's the first gray one in the used pile. And now that means the Brits get to hold on to the harem card as a possible shot against Turkey next turn. Not sure I don't think I'm doing that by the rules, but again, the rules are pissing me off too much. And now it's the very tiring economics phase, and I don't feel up to starting to do that now. That's what I thought I was going to get into, but again, the game spoiled my mood, as it so often does. I'm kind of slowly working my way through the economic phase, and you know, I mean, not having Raider work is really kind of brutal. I don't know, but anyway, I found a chart that I hadn't noticed before, which gives the setup forces. Now it feels like it's pretty much everything that they produce, so it's okay. So for example, Denmark's 2 infantry SP, a leader, and a fleet. Now this marks to 11.2. Let's take a look at it. This is the diplomacy phase. I don't know if anywhere it says that you set up by this thing, but it's kind of weird if the nation hasn't had a chance to build stuff up. So that's kind of a disturbing facet to it all. For example, Denmark shouldn't be able to rebuild its boat. It doesn't produce enough money to do it, right? Just as one quick thing, it never produces enough. You might convince me over the course, you know, of 5 years or something, it would be able to. But, you know, it wouldn't by the money, right? The $20 is too much, but you might convince me that Denmark would make a concentrated effort to rebuild its navy in that time, 5, 10 years, whatever. But in the course of the game, you know, I don't know. Hope that England takes you over, or somebody who's not allowed to give you enough money, but you cheat and allow them to. I don't know. What else? I guess that's all I came in to say. I'm trying to do the Austrians right now. It is a little complicated because they have lost one of their armies, basically, the Army of the Rhine. Yeah, it still exists, but England may be willing to fund them, but I don't do the English economy first. So it's kind of tough to make that judgment, and England probably wants to keep building boats, so I'm not going to throw too much money at them. Certainly the 7 there I could throw. I could also throw some negative, go into debt a little bit. I know that England has a lot of money coming to them, so yeah, I don't necessarily feel too bad with funding the Austrians. The main reason I'm doing this is because Austria is being pushed back so hard and has taken enough losses that if they do need the extra cash for extra armies, for extra strength points, I'm willing to fund some of that. Russia, look, Russia's close to winning the game. I don't want to fund anything for them. All right, worked my way through the economic phase. The English built 3 navies, which took up the majority of their purchasing. And they also built as much army as they can. They still have a little bit left. Not much, but they have so little manpower, it's very hard for them to replace, well, to build their army up into place. They haven't really lost anything. And I replaced the units up here in Bristol, where I should be able to coordinate things and get another force to try and take Portugal, but now Portugal's got its minor troops in play. Why does it not have a leader? That's a good question. Well, we'll put the Portuguese leader there. He sucks. I mean, he's totally useless, right? Except he can command the troops. But I think it's more important for me to focus on Gibraltar right now. That's pushing us into the diplomacy phase. I know it doesn't seem like I've done much, but economics takes me a long time in this, even though it's much less complicated than, say, EU's. I just have a harder time focusing on actually doing it. This night is falling on Sunday. No major diplomacy happened. I played the card against Sweden. It didn't work. But in terms of minor diplomacy, Britain picked up the Hanseatic League, which they weren't trying for before, but now that it's sealed off by the Prussians, we feel like, if we end up at war with Prussia, it'll give us an entry into Hanover and whatnot. And that kind of looks not unlikely. And in fact, we can start shifting forces there. Portugal is still possible. We'll see. And the other thing is Bavaria. Now that Baden has been conquered by the French and not let loose as a minor power, Bavaria is now adjacent to them, so they can make that into a satellite. Now later they can release Baden if they want that extra core or whatever it is, and use it as a minor power again. But right now, I still didn't build all my forces. This is Young Guard, they're not available yet. And I guess that puts me to the initiative pool. I got to dig out the British fleet marker. I don't think the coalition needs 2 naval moves this turn. Well, it's barely Monday, but, and I've been just, wasting time, mainly watching videos. The book I read was easy. This next one, not so easy. I'm kind of giving up on the philosophy one, but went for something a little easier, but still not as light as the fiction or diaries that I was reading. So let's start pulling some chits. I don't know. I don't know how much I'm going to get done, but I feel like I should at least pull one. Even though there are rules to prevent winter quarters from coming up as the first chit, got an Empire Naval as my first chit and shifted a ship over. Some hopes of trying to get through something. I don't know. I don't know where I can hide my Navy. And then 3 winter quarters in a row. And yeah, I mean, I tried to shuffle and everything. That means basically we keep the same French activation up here. And I guess shift to summer where there won't be a winter quarters. Oh, fuck. Well, we got another public event due. The harem event. By the way, the Turkish instability, whatever the hell that is, took effect. I didn't really mention it. It's like a special rule, but it's basically 1807. Mustafa IV took charge. Turkey's got to be careful because they can be thrown out of war. So, like, they may end up just in an automatic peace, which makes things kind of ugly. But the harem, if Turkey's at war, it now becomes neutral according to Turkish instability. Same as before. Well, this is just gone at this point with no effect. I figured we'd put it into play late to try to protect, one turn later, to protect if Turkey went to war against Russia, but they did not. And yeah, I mean, Turkey kind of doesn't want to go to war, even though they're getting set up for it and their troops are pretty much all out there. I just don't feel like I can win a war against Russia. And I know that I'm going to get another Sultan next turn as well, which is going to cause this 50-50 chance of ship going south. Other than that, well, I guess we pretty much jumped to the diplomacy, because if anybody wanted to buy anything, an army or something, they would have done it last turn. I got some people with money. The Austrians and the Turks have excess cash, which they can throw into their diplomacy efforts. Write one thing down. Spain is actually formally allied with France again, even though they'd been dropped from the alliance. So they're back at war with Austria and Russia. If they weren't, I don't know. Yeah, they were still at war with them because they have to be, because they're at war with Britain. But yeah, the French withdrawal from the bloc. Now Spain has rejoined. I don't know what it does. It really only impacts Spain. France doesn't really care that Spain's part of their bloc. Spain's not going to be able to force a British surrender, but they might be able to do another break with France. That'll cost another victory point, though, to do it. Turkey finally got Egypt on their side. I look at the force pool that they're supposed to gain, and well, the troops they're supposed to gain, and it is quite hefty, actually. It's everything. 2 infantry, 2 militia, 2 cav. More than I was giving before. Plus a leader. Now, I think their leader is dead. Because I can't find him. But I also can't find him here. They had a leader back in the 1792 scenario, but I don't think he made it into a bag. I put a Turkish leader there to command because he can command the 6-point force. My error, I had him deployed over in Constantinople because this little square here indicating that it's a minor, it's very hard for me to tell, and especially when it's just a colored block as opposed to anything else. I still feel like they should only be allowed to command if their own forces are present. Not in the rules, but he's such a good leader. He was obviously my best commander available. Anyway, I swapped the 2 3-star leaders and put the Egyptian over here. I think that's all we have, and then it's build another cup, and I'm going to go down and watch more videos, I guess. Because, oh, wait. Oh, no, the Turkish war. The Turkish instability. It wasn't a Turkish war. Didn't happen. Okay. After a couple hours sleep, I'm awake again. It's hard for me to sleep very long right now. The pains in my legs wake me up. My knee, when I'm laying down for too long, seems to really have problems, but the other parts also hurt. All right, let's keep pulling chits then. Not quite keep pulling chits. Let's fill the chit cup and pull some chits. Coalition land move, which we had to get because the French moved last 2 turns ago. It's a 4, though, which means very little can move. I looked over some stuff. 1, it's summertime, so there's absolutely no hurry in trying to get things done. Didn't think there would be in spring either early on, but turned out before even a land shit got drawn. In addition, Charles doesn't necessarily want to expose himself to Napoleon, although right now he may be bigger than Napoleon's army. It's not going to be enough of an advantage to be worth fighting for. But the Russians have a supply problem, which I just noticed. This is because Prussia left the war. We have a depot here that gets us into these areas, but nothing gets us to Prague. It's just a little too far away. And there's a similar barrier here between Vienna. Now, it's fine for the Austrians. They just need a fortress. But doesn't work for the Russians. They need a chain, which means I need to get another depot down there somewhere. I'm also was relying on this depot. Well, I'm not sure I was, but I was using. But it would have been helpful. Perhaps, I'm not sure. And I have no miners anywhere near me. So we're going to have some attrition checks falling out of here if I can't figure out a way to get a depot down there. Now let me check. Russia had enough money. Knowing this situation, I could pay $2. Oh, I have a depot with the Second Army. Second Army is which one? I think it's Bagration. Yeah. Let me pay for that second depot, though, with that same army. Oh, I can't. It's... Actually, I couldn't have even reinforced those armies. But I don't know what I did with them. I just wasn't paying attention. But I do need to have a leader on that thing, so that I can try to set up a supply line somewhere. But this forces the Russians back into more Austrian territory. Kind of a ghostly, ghastly noise. I don't know what it is. Bad brakes. It may be, I hear the train horn. It may be the wheels of the train. Now the train is very far away, but there's not a lot of sound out here. And they may have been echoing, because I can hear, the wheels on the track, and I can hear the horn, but I wouldn't think I could hear the screeching of the wheels. But that may well have been what it was. Also pulled their 4-point move. I immediately looked at, hey, I've got Kutuzov out of supply then, huh? Because supply is actually checked just before combat. I remember that because the out of supply markers mean nothing. I could attack with the Army of the North, which is this one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. I think it might be a worthwhile thing. My first thought had been, oh, I could bring Soule up and force march into him. But I think I can actually hit that army. Now, let's make sure this is not an army, which means Kutuzov's not going to be more than one army's size. So I think it's worth hitting him, forcing an attrition check on him. I believe that's how it works. Oh, it doesn't force an attrition check, but it gives him the -4 on the combat table for being out of supply. Which, again, those stupid fucking out of supply markers, I don't know if it's a -4. Yeah, it's a -4. Those stupid fucking out of supply markers don't make sense, right? Because the only time that you would need those markers is when you're being attacked. So, a piece of the game that, again, feels like the rules aren't in alignment with the components, which is right. Well, the rules are the rules. During combat resolution for the defender, yeah. Just weird. It's also odd. At the end of each combat resolution for the phasing player is when you resolve it here. I thought it was before combat that you had to make the attrition check. Here we go. See, an attrition check takes place before each battle. I mean, the rules they're not even consistent. Unfortunately, those Russian units are in Hesse and Hanover. They cannot be struck, because that's neutral Prussian territory, and I didn't declare war on Prussia. In fact, the last thing that happened diplomatically having anything to do with that front was Prussia and France came to an understanding, free peace. If it had been a legitimate peace treaty, the Russians would have had to leave Hanover and Hesse and been teleported into Saxony, which is an Austrian state, into these two fortresses. Maybe this would be an overstacking, I think, with either of the armies. And then further back, I'm just going to force them to move. But in the future, if I remember, I will teleport them on a free piece. I'm also free to go into Thuringia, which gives me a little bit more flexibility, so it's not just a pure bone for the Russians. But I think they have to get the hell out on this movement phase. I am able to establish supply, though, because control of Dresden actually means 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I move this supply wagon back, I was trying to get these detachments in play, but they would have to cut through Posen to get into range. But this supply wagon could do the job. It just has to make the link here. And he has activated a force, I guess. But making the link to Prague is good enough. Prague to Dresden, Dresden to here. I've got a supply base here, which gets me not quite to those guys. They were counting on Hesse. I can't go through Magdeburg. Technically, I can't go through Hesse either. I'm going to allow myself to get out of there without the out of supply modifier, because I would have been allowed out. But again, I'm going to have to do it right now. This is what we get to after the reorganization. These guys, I probably should have bought an army for them. There's not enough steps to really fill out an army, but with the Saxons, I would have had enough, and maybe throw some Russians in there for a multinational army. Charles alone, afraid to face Napoleon. Napoleon's better. I'd rather wait still, even though this is my fancy one move. I did consolidate a double army group here, which gives me some defensive capability. And that's in Thuringia, which is owned by the Austrians. I think it's actually a minor ally of the Austrians. It's so fucking hard to remember. Yeah. You know, what's where and everything without markers right on the board. And these just don't seem to do it as well. The situation is so confused, and often seems to be in this game, in a way that it's not in like War and Peace or Empires and Arms. First of all, in War and Peace, each color, each player has their own force pool for every minor. In some cases, you're just using landwehr for the minor, or militia or something. If you're not expected to control that minor, you'll get crappy landwehr instead of the minor regulars, which are worse. But in Empires and Arms, I don't think there are as many minors. There's close. But the circumstances very seldomly feel as mixed up. No, there aren't as many, because there aren't things like Neufchâtel and Geneva as separate minors. That's a part of it. Anyway, I'm done with this movement, and I've had enough of the game for a little bit. I'm also very tired. Empire land movement, given that this is summer and there's no possibility of winter quarters causing issues, I delayed with most of my units here. But I did reinforce Messina, just keeping him, you know, up to level with Johann, but that means he's probably not going to do anything. And the Spaniards started their siege of Gibraltar, for whatever that's worth. The English aren't going to be able to knock them out of there. a challenge in Portugal is the most likely to actually work. I actually probably should have moved some of those English units to get the main army to the port. Russian naval phase, the Allies ended up destroying the French fleet that was floating around in the South Atlantic, actually. And then the Russians sailed over and made an invasion of Lorient, which is successful. This gives them another direction to come at Paris. Remember, if they get Paris at the end of a turn, they win. Period, the end. So that creates a threat that the French kind of have to respond to. This is my only naval move for this season, so I wanted to do it. I can operate out of supply down here. That's not really a problem, but I can't get because I only have 3 steps. So it's not that big a deal to move around with that. But Paris is, somewhat defended. And I have Joseph down here, so I can kind of coordinate forces over there to deal with the Russians there. But that buys me some time, forcing those units away might buy me some advantages over in the main front. I'm probably not going to be able to grab Paris with those Russians. Couldn't make an attack from the channel. I could have attacked something like Antwerp, but that would have been particularly difficult to take. The reason I can't go in the channel is the Brits have it clogged up, and I'm not allowed to be in there, which is, it's just fucked up. It really is. The naval rules to this, like so much, they just don't quite work. Here on Tuesday, it's early in the morning. Not that early, but pretty early, like before 8. I was supposed to go out at 8, but that got moved to 9, so I'm up here playing. I'm going to go on a hike, swim, stuff like that, which is very cool. That means another day I don't go shopping, but it's too hot a day to go shopping, so absolutely cool there. I pulled one chit at this point, an Empire land chit. Most of the Empire units hadn't moved, shifted some stuff around in France, reinforced things in Italy, moved a double army into place to face the Russian double army. But right now, I'm handling Napoleon, who has marched up from Ratisbon to Prague, caught an Austrian force in Prague. I don't want to reinforce it because it's going to be a blowout no matter what. Charles is back here in Vienna. I thought about building him in Prague, but I can't because it's not a fortress. I don't know, because there's countries without a fortress that can build their troops, so I just don't want to look up the rules. This is what it comes down to. I came to something interesting, though. As I'm running through the odds table, I hit the lead unit combat bonus. And my memory of this was the lead unit is an option. You don't have to take it. And I look it up, and that is indeed the case. There we go. Lead assault unit. Each player may designate a corps as its lead assault whose combat modifier apply. The downside is the first loss will be applied to this corps. Now, there are certain troops that have a -1 combat capability. You never have to apply that. It's a totally valueless piece of information. The militia units, yeah, you could make them your lead combat unit. Doesn't really do you anything. Gets you a -1. You can take your first hit on the militia. You must. But yeah, it's again a place where information that's contained on the counters and whatnot doesn't really work right with the system. As if the system maybe moved ahead of the components at some point or another. Maybe you were supposed to always have to. So if you were, with nothing but militia, you had to place one. But that's not how the rules read now. So the militia -1 factor, totally unimportant. Anyway, on to the combat. One thing I forgot, there's a diary for movement there. Napoleon also overran a Russian supply depot. This is an important depot, one that connected things up. So we're going to hit that out of supply situation again. Napoleon had to fall back from Prague after a successful attack, almost an overrun. I mean, it was like 3-1, in order to maintain his supply center. They moved a few other forces up, that's it. There's 2 more chits left. I don't think anything's going to happen in them. Charles will probably reposition along with these forces. But I really don't think anybody wants to do a second move. Also, some of these detachments are going to fiddle around. And I've kind of decided detachments can be part of an army. Screw it. I've got the Prussians with detachments all over their army. So I'm just like, yeah, I can't treat them as anything special. The only thing that they do that's special, I can make a special rule for if I really want to, which is that an army that has a detachment in it can't serve as a supply source unless it also has a depot. That's the special rule, is that you can't just, create a supply, not a supply source, a supply link by, having a detachment in an army. But it can with any other force. And I can kind of see that argument, which is that an army is so big that just troops aren't enough. Like it won't funnel resources out of it if it doesn't have a depot in it. It feels like such a minor case, though, that it's just not, even that is just not worth paying too much attention to. The 2 remaining chits, I think, are a movement chit, 1 for each power. I don't know. I might as well finish up, I guess. Might as well. Because I'm not expecting much to happen here. The case of the militia changes, is pretty much the same kind of situation as the out of supply markers. The militia having that number on them, useless. Out of supply markers serve no purpose in the game. I guess the out of supply markers might have some sort of, you might be able to use them for something, with that word on them, right? Like in the sense of, it's a reminder that I have to check supply for these guys or something if they get hit with battle. I don't know. One interesting thing that happened to me, we had discussions about my erasers at some other point. I have 2 of them. My reality is breaking apart more and more in the sense that I remember finding 2 of those in like garbage or something like that. It just never happened. It must be a dream or something. And I know that may not seem like much, but it felt very real, and it felt like it happened not long ago, like within the last week or 2. And it just didn't. The dream probably did. Anyway, what did I do? Charles marched forward and took Salzburg back. He's in supply at Salzburg, barely. The Austrian supply lines are kind of getting fucked up because the only countries that I have to the west are ones without fortresses. The miner is in supply and whatnot from the capital, I think, but I can't use it as a supply link the way I can fortresses. And that's what I really need. And also kind of pinned up here. Nothing I can do about that. I guess I could go 4 or 5. We'll go there. There just aren't a lot of kind of hide from Napoleon there. I've got like, you know, I had like 6 steps of infantry up near Prague. Now, Charles has a full army, or almost full. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Yeah, he has a full army. So he couldn't have absorbed the units in Prague, which is why I brought him in at Vienna instead. But damn, you know, 4 of those 6 steps are gone, and the other 2 are kind of having to, you know, they're kind of out of combat for a while. Really having a hard time finding what to do with things. This should be the Empire 1 coming up, and that should be the last chit left. A little change around the edges, and I've complained about this, that I would make. If I could solve the big problems, right? Like making the whole thing into a single campaign game. Stuff like that, but the cards don't support it. I think they could. Minor countries would surrender when conquered at the end of any turn. But they can only be reestablished at the beginning of a year. I think that would be a fair compromise, because it's just too much of a pain to like try to scramble at winter and get your conquests in, you know? And major powers can surrender whenever. So why not minors, you know? Just feels fucking weird. Here we are, end of summer. There wasn't any attrition of any value. These guys actually, just a detachment. They're fine in a 3-step fortress. Fine. There was something else I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah. So I have this strong tendency not to do forced marches because I don't want to take attrition. There's a trade-off of like, you know, strength point losses, which maybe aren't a big deal. If you don't have any forces to rebuild, taking some casualties for attrition makes perfect sense. I don't know if anyone's really in that position. France is the closest. Taking a couple of strength points would be worth it, but I feel like spring and summer are not the turns to do that in. Autumn is the turn to do that in, and by then, you know, you might have taken losses from combat and whatnot. Austria already has. They had built their entire army. Well, now they've taken losses. And so it's like, I'm not so sure, but I can easily rebuild my army, including those losses. So I think autumn is the turn of forced marches. You don't want to do it in winter because the attrition losses increase. But in autumn, it makes absolute sense to start risking losing pieces, I think. Because it's late enough in the year that you've taken most of your losses. Winter might be really, really short. All right, that's the end of the summer turn. And I will not do any more today until I get home. I'm about ready to start the winter 1807, this autumn 1807 turn. But it is Wednesday, midday. Yesterday I didn't get to play any. I guess I could have, but I was so pooped and tired and exhausted, and I ended up having to get up real early, and then we didn't actually leave my place until like, I guess, close to 10 a.m. But went and ended up splooshing around in a creek for 5 hours or so. Nice swimming hole, nice rapids to play with, just all kind of cool stuff. We were supposed to go walking and stuff too, but it was just nice to be outside and playing in the water. Got some sun and everything in the middle of like a burnt out forest, which is kind of neat. Anyway, not just burned. It was recovering. All right, let me start figuring out the interface stuff and whatnot. I don't know any troops coming in, but there's always at least the diplomacy die rolls. But there may also be, well, there's always the opportunity to switch leaders, and there may also be a major diplomatic maneuver here. See, Turkey has to make choices. They would like to get the Ottoman Empire formed. And it may... See, their problem is the Russian army is gone. So this is a... And... Oh, I forgot to roll for it. On a 5. I'm assuming that means a 5 or a 6. The Russians succeed in their Persian War. Okay, they did not. So this is kind of an opportune time for Turkey to go to war, but it's not really, because the war with majors could get fucked up. Ugh. And unfortunately, minor diplomacy, like, I can't make diplomacy on Algeria and go to war if they don't join me. So I've got to kind of make the choice, you know, do I want to just go to war with them? I can probably beat them. I do have a diplomatic advantage for Algeria. I have a +2. Anybody taking them is kind of asking for me to go to war with them. Shit. Yeah, that's the big choice. Anyway, I need to think about it, and I need to deploy forces. Because whatever I can shift down from Constantinople is probably enough to deal with Algeria. Here's the thing with Turkey. Their victory conditions, I didn't look them up, but I remember them. But the ones they're kind of aiming for, they have to take Kiev, they have to form the Holy Roman Empire, and then it's like Odessa or Vienna, I think. And I was saying, hey, Odessa is easier to be occupying than Kiev, and that's true. But in terms of conquest, Crimea is harder to conquer than Podolia. For whatever it's worth, I don't think it really matters, because it happens if you occupy those cities at the end of the turn. Otherwise, you would never have Paris, right? So, yeah, right now I do not want to go to war with Russia because I'm in that Turkish instability period where I'm getting another sultan relatively soon. So even though this would be an opportune time to be at war with Russia, I'm going to get thrown out of that war if I go in. If I'm at war with somebody over Algeria, yeah, I think I want to go to war with Algeria. If I'm at war with somebody over Algeria, I will be able to conquer Algeria. The person most likely to try to support them is Spain. If nobody supports them, I just get them. And then this might not be an inopportune time for me to go to war with Spain over Morocco next turn. Because, hey, if I get thrown into peace, too bad. But if I don't, I'm hitting right on a winter turn and can actually conquer Morocco. And then I get out of the war. So I can utilize that Turkish instability to my advantage, actually. Spain decided to support Algeria. They were the only ones who were willing to. And look at the Algerian force setup. And it's 2 infantry strength points. Okay, that's their core. And a leader. I don't have a leader for Algeria. I just don't. This is what? This is the Irish. Yeah, I simply do not have one. I don't know where I would find one. I don't think there was one. So I got no idea. Then after the war, which is noted over there, the minor diplomacy, the only change, Mecklenburg has gone over to the Russians. This doesn't really do much, but when Prussia goes to war with Russia, which they don't feel like they want to do yet, then mainly because the Russians haven't been beaten up enough, then they will have an advantage. They will have, you know, the ability to take Mecklenburg. What does it do for the Russians? If they're involved in a big coalition or something, not much. Mecklenburg doesn't even have a port. It's really a worthless location. But they have a bonus in getting it. So, hey, whatever. And they went for it. But I don't see much value. The only reason they have a bonus is Prussia and the Swedes there. The Hanseatic League is useful because it has ports. Mecklenburg is a piece of garbage, but it's hard to take because it doesn't have a fortress. I mean, it's not really hard to take. It's hard to remember to take. And I don't know who got hands. Okay, the Brits did. And creating the initiative pool, I dropped the extra coalition naval phase in. The French are not responding. They don't really care. Turkey will be operating in the coalition turn because Spain is operating in the empire turn. And I guess that drops us to the activation phase. I'm going to pause here. Trying to convince myself to go out and get some vodka. I have enough for like a day of drinking, like 1 day's drink. But that means I will never drink it. Like, must keep my reserves. And I could go out, I'm supposed to go out to eat tomorrow. And I also, like, there's going to be some kind of Mexican food. And I'm thinking it would be nice to bring like a little bottle of tequila or something. But I could stop and get wine or beer on my way in. I don't know. Anyway, I don't think I'm going out for booze today. I got a big walk tomorrow. That's enough. But I've also like let 3 or 4 hours go, just fucking around on the computer, watching videos, playing with chatbots, whatever. It's just so easy for me to get sucked into stuff on there. All right, let's start playing with chits, I guess. It's kind of crazy. All 4 Empire land chits came out. Couldn't use them because of this. Then an Empire Naval, which I don't have anything I want to do. Just making sure, because I had a loose Navy, but it got sunk, I think. And finally got my coalition land chit. But, Yeah, pretty crazy. It's so funny how, I do almost nothing. Sure, it's an early chit in the game, but it's a 4. There isn't much to do. Charles ran around, killed a couple of stacks, took Ratisbon. He's potentially threatened by Napoleon, but behind river lines and whatnot, and in a pretty cool position in a lot of ways. So I don't know if Napoleon wants to actually hit him. Now look at the double army for the Russians. Honestly, I feel like a double army should have to pay that 2 extra points to consolidate at the beginning of their movement, no matter what. Because there's no other double force like it. And it would kind of, I don't know if that's the intention, but it would kind of slow down these kind of huge stacks from being able to just roll over everything, right? And make them a little bit less appealing. But I don't particularly want to move forward. If I move forward, I give Davout the interception bonus, and I'm facing about an equivalent size force. I feel like I'm better holding off, even though if I can get a breakthrough and make a run for it, maybe I can get Paris, but maybe this is my best way. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But again, yeah, I played a chit and I feel like I'm done for a while. I back up here for another chit, and this time it's a pretty decent one. It's going to be a lot of attacks. Starting off with Messina hitting Johann finally. One of the problems, not only is there the river crossing issue, but Messina, Johann's also, Milan is in a swamp, which is problematic. It's a -1 in addition. So I definitely don't want to just cross the river. So I've slipped around. I don't know about that troop in Romagna. Anyway, I'll leave this in my head. And that actually takes up all my movement. 3 extra movement points into a swamp. But what I wanted to touch on was, I'm considering the difference between, say, raid and the fact that I wasted a day today, pretty much. Not reading, just really jerking off on the computer one way or another. And I did the same stuff I would have done, and I've been doing this a fair amount when I'm playing raid, but I'm lacking any kind of compulsion to do it. It's not going to get rid of, the underlying problem that made me take up raid as an addiction, which had some definite value. It added structure to my life, let me, know that I always had something to do. And while I was doing it, I would, enjoy videos or whatever else I'm doing at the same time. But I wasn't really taking much pleasure in raid, right? I was just doing my fucking around on it. But anyway, yeah, it's, it did serve a purpose. It would still serve that purpose. I can't go back to it now. I've missed enough days that I'm like, yeah, I'm too far behind. I lost too much. Just not interested. Apparently there's something big happening recently, some changes that would have helped me. If they had happened, a few weeks earlier, maybe I would have been still playing. But anyway, so we've got what amounts to a major battle here. There was an attempt to intercept to catch him at the bridge. The interception gives a bonus, so it would have helped a little bit. It's going to, like I said, it's going to be a major battle. The Austrians got 2 cards, Patriotic Enthusiasm, not going to help, but their second card was General's Health, which is going to be an additional -1 to the combat value of the commanding leader, and also a morale check reduction. Yeah, he's not going to get his bonus from morale. The French threw out a refused flank, unlikely to happen. Would have picked this if, with a 0 leader or whatever. And surprise, I already knew that he had light cav with him, and he actually has a cav leader as well. So that wasn't going to help. The French's automatic is going to be a fortified farm, great. And a slope, which they get on a 1 in 6. A 5 or a 4, 5, or 6, because they're using a +1 leader. And so we get that. So we'll be getting the +2 from those. And then we'll deal with the leaders, which will be a +1 here, a +1 there. And then go on for the other calculation. And ends up defeating Johann mainly with a huge disparity in like a 9-point difference in the die rolls with a big impact. Does not get a demoralization on him though, and begins a siege of Mantua. I did see one reason why you don't want detachments in an army. Although I'm not sure it really matters, because you can just take a step loss off a unit and turn it into a detachment and then absorb it into another unit, so you can shift forces around. And so if you take hits on your big units, you can really easily recover them anyway. The reason you don't want detachments is or why detachments would be maybe problematic, is that if you had detachments in an army, you can take hits on other things, militia, whatever, and then funnel detachments in. But if you can break detachments off and shift troops around that way anyway, your good units are always going to be full up. Infantry. Infantry is the only thing we're worried about with detachments and with this capability. It just feels to me like the detachments are the lesser problem, because you can make them anyway when you need to. I don't think militia can make detachments, but I don't really want to look it up. It just feels like there's so much broken in the game anyway that it's like, yeah, you can't really fix it all easily. Are there ways? Yeah, I'm sure there are, but you're not going to end up with the game that like you have written in any kind of corrected form that's workable. It's just going to be a mess. Now, maybe the Vanania rules go beyond just fixing, just putting the errata in and fixing things that are clearly problematic. But man, it's just too much. And certainly it should not have been released again without at least the errata included. Despite a statement that says it was. Okay, let me go on and figure out how to move some other units maybe. Napoleon marches across and grabs Dresden. Now that doesn't knock Saxony out of the war or anything until winter. Again, I may change that. I don't know. It just feels so lame. But then I swung this way and brought that double army into place, and the Russians were unable to intercept. So now I've got a triple army sitting there in Dresden, which is as big as you can have, even if you have more than 3 armies, which is only France. And now I got a bigger force facing down the Russian force. Now the Russian force is behind the French force, closer, to Paris, and might want to go charging forward. It's out of supply anyway. And now this is where it matters maybe that you can't conquer miners, because if that Russian force charged forward and captured, geez, I don't know what it is, Berg, say, they would be able to then draw supply out of Berg and continue their attack forward. Whereas what they really need to do is fall back somehow this way, and without crossing into Prussia, and end up reestablishing their supplies because owning Paris doesn't do them any good unless they can be supplied. And they will not have supplies from this direction, from that direction. Nothing's working. They just don't have the depots available. And they only have enough money to buy one additional depot, which they could put in the army, or they could put, here or at St. Petersburg, but they need two to get that to work, and they need depots running. They got the one down to here. Whoops. I think I flipped that. And they need another one to get the crossing here. All right. They can get to here, but they can't get to Saxony, and they can't get across there's like a barren area of Austria that just runs across here that the Russians aren't really able to operate without another depot getting them through there. I do have a wagon here, and I do have 2 depots total, but that wagon is with my main army, so it's going to have to move out of supply. Probably my best move is to shift down. I don't really want to connect up with Bavaria, with Charles's force, but if 3 armies against 2 isn't going to work well for me. It's probably not going to get the French a 2-to-1 advantage, which is a +1, but it will probably get them the +2 artillery advantage and the +2 cav advantages. It depends on what the forces are like, but yeah, it's just not pleasant. So the coalition is in a lot of trouble trying to, reposition themselves. Anyway, I moved a chit. A couple chits relatively minor. A neutral naval, I think that's just Prussia. They don't have a navy. And then a coalition land 2. And I did a couple of things with that. I ran out of Wittenberg, and cut across the mountains here. Ended up losing a step doing that. And then I dropped off a detachment here. It has an activation because it was under a commander. I think that's how it works. I don't really care. Because otherwise this guy could pick it up and move it on his movement. Of course, an army could do that or whatever anyway. But I don't really care. Anyway, that extends my supply line, and I moved the rest here. That's a couple of detachments. That, again, extends supply line. So now I have supply out to here, which means I'm still going to have to take an attrition this turn, but I can operate in Bavaria at least with the Russian army. Something of an advantage, I guess. I don't see anything else I want to do there. I'm going to pull more chit. French got their big Empire 1 going. I don't think anybody else wants to do anything other than them. They shifted some detachments, basically coming out of the Palatinate, which I already own, but went up to here because that lets me supply Napoleon, who would be cut off from supply by that army. I'm not actually sure that an army projects a zone of influence when it's out of supply, but again, doing what I'm doing, it's going to get overrun, but I'll be in supply if the army leaves. Also may have reinforced into Mantua with a detachment because fuck it, I'm done worrying about that. I want to go back to how I was playing back in the 1792 scenario. More chits. We may be able to run through this. I don't think there's a hell of a lot more to do. There's the Russian army to deal with. Don't really like taking attrition checks with big armies. Although, again, it's possible to do it. Taking the losses, you can rebuild the losses, but like forces that are far forward, the ones that really want to do it, are ones that don't necessarily, you're not going to be able to replace many losses on them. Russians did, in fact, sweep through, overrunning, grabbing this. I'm not charging that 2 extra. I didn't do it for the French, so I don't feel like I should do it for the Russians, for the stacked army. And also took Wurzburg, So Bavaria is now kind of under threat. Ulm and Munich are all that has to be taken to cause a surrender. But it's weird what will happen with a surrender. I'm not entirely sure. I think Bavaria itself is potentially absorbable from this. Whereas then Berg, I don't know what it becomes. I have to look up the surrender rules if it comes to that at the end of a turn. It's weird. I think multiple. So if I recall correctly, states with multiple, like minor states with multiple provinces, are able to surrender not in winter. And like I think, again, I have to look it up, but I think they can actually lose their home province, like their main province. And that's just fucked up. Like, Berg, which they own, is not at all under any risk from the coalition. But I don't know. Even just knocking Bavaria out of the war would be good enough. Making them neutral would be good enough for me, because then I could start doing diplomacy on them. And sure, maybe the French have a better chance of getting the diplomacy than whatever, but, you know. Anyhow, more chits. Like I said, I think we're at the end of the turn, basically, here. It's just a matter of playing it out, seeing what comes up. There really isn't a lot left that I want to move. And Empire 3 did nothing with it. What if I... See, I don't want to force march, but next turn's winter. See, the problem is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gets me here. I'll be so far out of supply. But 7, 8, 9 gets me here where I'd be in supply. So I think I actually want to move this and do that. But before I get to that, the thing that's bad, you know, if I'm right about how the surrender of miners with 2 provinces work, or with additional provinces works, you know, again, it's like this weird situation where there's, you know, one way of doing things and then rules that work in a different way. Let me look it up. Let me look it up, because now I'm really worried about it. I think surrender is before that shit. I don't remember. Nope. So it's after. So what is the... When their capital is taken, as explained above, these miners are not conquered, but they surrender. Now, maybe that as explained above means it only happens in winter. The conqueror chooses one province adjacent to his national territory. No matter whether this province contains the minor power's capital or not, the diplomacy is placed in the neutral. I think the Bavarian counter would then be a Berg neutral state. There's no counter for Berg. Another option would be that Berg just kind of disappears and becomes a French-controlled territory, which at least, like, the counters allow me to represent. I have no way of representing Berg as a minor neutral, you know? And so that's the problem there. I could read this, when their capital is taken as explained above, the as explained above, to mean that it has to happen in the winter conquest phase. But it's just... It's so convoluted what you have to try to do to jump through hoops to figure these rules out and try to make some sort of sense out of them. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if it had said, you know, on any conquest phase or something like that, as opposed to, which is what I thought it did, but it doesn't seem to. So I take back what I said about, you know, little special cases being different, but I have to check anyway, just to make sure. Anyway, what did I want to do? I wanted to run the Spaniards. After the Spaniards moved forward without taking loss, well, Moroccans, really, we got a coalition naval where I landed in Oporto. I'm not going to be in supply there. I could put an out of supply marker to remind me that I got to deal with that at the end of the turn. And I shipped some Turkish troops down from Constantinople into Tunis and then marched forward from Tunis. I've got to move the Navy back here so it can bring the Egyptian forces forward as well. I got a bit of a problem though. Like with the English here, there's no supply beyond Tunis. I can draw supply to here, but I can't move forward. That's going to mean it's going to be hard to get any kind of siege operations going in Algeria. So now I'm going to have to start focusing on getting supplies down there. And this is going to be really tough. I have the capability to buy some depots. Let's see where I can build them. Maybe I can build them in Tunis, and that would help a lot. If I can't, I have to ship them. And that kind of means not bringing these guys forward. Because if I can't build them in Tunis, I can't build them in Egypt. And that's going to be kind of icky. But yeah, getting supplies into Algeria is going to be tough. Morocco is probably not going to fall before winter. Might Algeria? Yeah, it depends on what the rules are. We've already got one winter quarters, happened a while back. So this turn could end on any chit draw. The most interesting thing about this set of videos, the whole series really, is how I cope with shitty rolls. Like on first blush, right? And how I start thinking about how I'll want to fix the game. So if you look at something like Campaign of Marlborough, I've played that a few times long ago, but I kind of remembered how to fix the problems in that game. It's a game that really is lacking the rules. It's probably not as bad as this, but it's the rules are written very, very sparsely, so sometimes it's hard to tell, you know, what's intended by them. That's a part of it, and I've come to solutions about that, notated stuff and whatever. With this one, I haven't really come to a solution for yet, but you're seeing how I struggle my way through a game that's this bad. And then we got, I don't know, an Empire land move that, well, we got a neutral move where I shifted some of the Prussians over to deal with Russia. We're beginning to feel like maybe France is getting enough of an edge. We probably don't want to start the war in the winter, but, you know, better to get the spring negotiations out of the way and whatnot, where we can really kind of seal things down. I don't think we want to join a French coalition, though. I think we just want to go to war with Russia. Try to grab as much of Poland as we can or whatever. And just put them in a position where, yeah, you know, look, either cut a deal with us and give us Masovia back, or, and maybe West Galicia for that matter, or, yeah, we're going to join the French coalition and deal with that. And you'll be facing, you know, two powers marching into you. Of course, France has Treaty of Tilsit, which is best used on Russia, because Russia's the hardest thing to conquer. Napoleon couldn't do it, of course. Tilsit is the way around that. But then we came up with the second winter quarters, so we're at the end of the turn. We got, like I said, an out-of-supply unit we got to deal with. And I think that's it. I think we got everything else into supply before this attrition phase. Well, it's like around 1:30 in the morning on Thursday now. It's still just fucking around. But I went through the spring interphase, built myself some of those depots. The British are building them to try to get supplies into Portugal. Turks are building them to try to extend their capabilities out of Tunis. And I do have to build them in Constantinople. It has to be national territory. I guess, actually, I could make it a little cheaper. National territory includes this. And that'll make it a little easier to ship stuff in. think I did much else. I may have shifted a leader or two. Then for diplomacy, the only thing left is Denmark, and nobody got them. Built my supply cup. It's winter, so a single winter quarters will end this. And, again, I just don't feel like playing all that much. Well, here we are, Thursday around noon. I just woke up. I woke up, I sleep for a few hours and I wake up again. I woke up around 10 or so, but more hours than I have been because the pain has gotten less. So I think I'm more to kind of my normal, hey, I gotta get up and pee. I'm an old man now. It doesn't always happen. But anyway, first two chits, I'll get to what's funny in a moment, I guess. First two chits were the two naval chits. The Empire didn't do anything, but the coalition set up a supply line into Portugal, and the Turks moved supply counters into Algeria as was planned. They just actually got it, bought it all and set it up, which is good. That means these guys are no longer going to be out of supply. That marker is just a reminder. It doesn't serve any real purpose. Anytime you have to check supply, you have to check it. But I might be forgetful in some cases without the reminder. So what was funny is that, all of yesterday and last night, I barely wanted to play at all. But now, I'm supposed to go out to dinner tonight, right? And I'm just like, oh no, I've only got X number of hours. This is how I was at work, right? I'd be like, oh, I gotta slip in and get my time in and whatever. When I have infinite time, or it feels like I do, there is no rush at all, and so there's no desire to play. But right now I'm like all gung-ho about getting this turn out of the way and getting this up on video, posted. I don't understand me. Raid would do it too. Raid would give me this itching that I've got to be on in 3 hours or whatever in the morning or whatever, and it'd come up and I'd actually play more than I would have if I was free. And yesterday I was just fucking around on the computer, but it's not too different when I'm reading too. I just, without any kind of time pressure type feeling, I just don't feel at all willing to do things. To be a coalition movement, it was a 3 counter, which means most of my units can move, not loose detachments and whatnot, not some really shitty commands. Moved my supply, decided against doing anything with the forces in Portugal. They're just not big enough to face the Portuguese army. Even with more in command and everything, I should probably fuck around with trying to get more forces into place. I'd rather be on the defensive than try to attack in about equal force and just risk it on the numbers. But with the Turks, well, I don't need a depot here, but I need one here now. So this is where I moved with the depots after moving these guys forward. I only moved these guys forward. They could have gone and sieged Algiers. If I took it, all I'd have to do is move these extra depots forward. But if I don't take it, then I'm in an ugly position where I have to get another coalition move to make it into the siege. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to take that risk. Am I an idiot? I wouldn't even have an advantage in the artillery. My chances are relatively low. And again, I can bring more forces up. The problem here is, this is my last turn. Yeah, I gotta go for it. This is my last turn before another Turkish instability comes into play and I'm knocked out of any wars I'm in. So I want to have Algeria this turn. Right, so I got a hell of a lucky roll in 11, which meant that I was able to take Algiers, and that means it will surrender unless the Spaniards can get it free with this. And this unit is now gonna be out of supply. See, this is the whole thing. I've got no supply check to put that marker on as a reminder. It's just I've cut the supply, so now I put it on as a reminder. It's got absolutely no game function. It's supposed to be put on when I make the supply check, but you check as defender when you take a battle, and you check on the attrition phase, and you check when you're about to move your units. Fuck, I only checked Persia once, speaking of checking things. So I checked in the spring, summer, and autumn. Okay, so these would have actually come back this turn. So the Coalition 3 was the oh look the big chit. Not only did I take care of those supply situations there, I moved the Army of Italy under John into Venice where it can get full reinforcements instead of just a couple points. It was either there or up into Innsbruck. And figure if I'm going to challenge in Italy, I have to be across the Alps. Charles, I didn't need to move this yet, so I wasn't going to. What about this guy? He might make sense to move, just to get him out of, he doesn't really want to be in Prague, but I'll figure that out in a moment. I moved a unit into Munich just to hold it because Bavaria is set to fall. Würzburg is in Russian hands. Charles went, overran a unit here, captured Ulm, moved back up into there to be in support. But then the Russians moved one unit in and seized Mainz. Then I couldn't figure out what to do with the second one, so I wanted to cluster my two armies together rather than leave them as a floating thing here. Now, it's possible the turn could end before Napoleon gets another action. If that happens, Bavaria is at risk of falling. If it doesn't, it's not. Now, yeah, Bavaria is only at risk of falling because the front line is right around Bavaria, so I can move around and do stuff there. And it's a winter turn. Like, if the front line had passed Bavaria, it would be really, really hard for me to dispatch forces into the backfields to mop up. Because it does have fortresses and whatnot. But I also have to hold Munich. It probably should have been overrun, at least the fortresses, no matter what, and dispatching like, you know, a single unit, especially a detachment, isn't really that big a deal to cover the things in the back. But yeah, this was a big one. I am out of pipe, and since this was a big thing, I'm going to stop. But I got to tell you, I'm still charged up to keep playing, right? I may not be after I go downstairs and read for a bit, and you know, because part of the thing is I just like watched a couple of videos and ate 2 half peanut butter and honey sandwiches. I'm trying to convince myself not to overeat, so I make, you know, one when I wake up, or I made one when I woke up, and then I'm like, I really liked that. I want another one, which actually makes me happier than making a whole one and eating it. Like, I don't know. Empire 3 chit conducted siege there, but you know, I'll do the same with Messene. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but I'm looking elsewhere. I got this big triple stack, and I'm considering splitting it up so that I can. Saxony is not mine yet. I have to take Wittenberg for that. Basically so that I can capture more territories rather than just move down and like try to take out the Russian army. Now this is somewhat risky. That Russian army could move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Take this with one of the forces. Like if they decided to force march, I'm not close enough to set up to conquer Paris easily at all. Yeah. So So I guess there's no huge risk in it. And just aim to like take Saxony, maybe take something else. I don't know. Who the fuck owns Thuringia? I think it's Austria. Yeah. That's actually an Austrian ally, so they probably have a chit up there. Which means it would fall this turn. There it is. It would actually fall this turn. Is it worth taking over? Is the question. It is if I can hold on to Baden, because then I can extend French territory into Thuringia. If I can't, it's kind of problematic because then I end up with a fucking useless minor. The one problem with it all is I'm going to lose the... well, I'm not going to lose the Palatinate. I'm going to lose the Palatinate's money. It's part of French territory now, so it wouldn't be conquered. So it's not a huge deal to let the Russians be there. The real risk with the Russians is that they capture Paris, which, if they do at this point, they win the game. Now that probably means Prussia's going to come into the war next spring as a coalition, either ally or co-belligerent. Not really sure allying is a good idea ever in this game, which is one of the problems. So in War and Peace, you're either pro-French or anti-French. In Empires in Arms, there are reasons you want to be part of an alliance. There may be here too. But there may be strong reasons not to want to be part of an alliance as well. And I guess there are in both games, but it feels here that not allying is more seductive than it is in an Empires in Arms type game. Anyway, see, this is the problem. Part of me wants to attack those Russians, but I don't really need to. So what I need to do is I need to take Wittenberg. I can use just a light force to take like Thuringia. I need to prevent Bavaria from falling, so I'll need to take something like Wurzburg. And then I could work on trying to cut the Russian supply line, which might be a very effective choice. These guys won't be out of supply. I mean, they'll be out of supply, but it won't matter. They don't have to make a supply check just because they're out of supply, because they've already moved. But it would throw that whole Russian situation into question. I think it's hard to tell. The detachment here, Ratisbon, Ulm. No, the Russians are going to be in supply either way. So I've got to do more than just cut those detachments off. So I don't know. This is where there are a lot of interesting options based on how much you want to split forces up and the rareness of being able to make a country surrender and shit like that. Württemberg, I got wiped out of my attempt to take Württemberg from the Austrians. That might be a worthwhile place to go. That's going to be Charles, though. So, again, that's a place where I probably want to have a couple of armies going there. Oh, boy. Before I make that complex decision, I moved Messina. He got Mantua on the first roll. He was only going to get 2. That gave him enough movement to go take Romagna. He could have also attacked in Venice, but I'm guessing Venice is not a swamp. I don't know why attacking Venice is particularly easy. Like, it's swampy terrain outside of the island, and the island itself isn't particularly accessible. Like, yes, there's a fortress side to it too, but I don't know. I think I'd make it a swamp just because it's hard to move through. It doesn't. I don't think I agree with the terrain there. But I decided grabbing both Lombardy and Romagna back is more valuable at this point. That'll allow me to create the Kingdom of Italy again. I know it says it's removed from the game, but other things that say they're removed from the game very obviously aren't. So since the wording is the same, I'm saying screw it, let it be reestablished. It never made sense to me that it should be one time only. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe those other things mean what they mean too. Maybe those miners are just destroyed. But I think it meant that a miner could never be reestablished. Yeah, if you take the wording the same way I took the Kingdom of Italy, it would mean no miners can ever be reestablished, and there's a specific rule for that. So fuck it. So yeah, that was my decision in Northern Italy. I still got to focus on that main fight there, and again, I kind of want to take as much as I can because it's only once a year that I can take stuff. Trip downstairs to get another pipe. Yeah, I'm still kind of hyper. I was thinking about victory conditions. The victory conditions in this, like in War and Peace, I don't remember which games out of Napoleonic Wars and some others, really relied on this kind of victory condition, automatic victory or end of game position victory, right? The games that rely on that exclusively, pretty much, are games which I don't know if it matters all that much if you get off to like a bad start the way France did in this game. If you think about France in this game in War and Peace, what ends up happening is the Austerlitz type setup means that, boom, oh look, Austria and Russia are kind of knocked out. Now, maybe Russia doesn't surrender. Okay, fine, whatever. But Austria gets knocked out of the war. And then, boom, Prussia gets knocked out of the war because they get picked off separately. But France never has their force pool completely tapped out, or has their force pool completely tapped out. So they're able to build everything up. Now, War and Peace, the force pool is larger than it is in this, proportionally, which means that there is a reason, I guess, to keep rotating through troops, through different coalitions and keep hitting them one at a time. Empires in Arms, though, if you don't do that, you're not going to pick up the glory points that you might need, because its system is based on how well you do over the course of the game. And if you think, hey, why is Napoleon considered all this great and everything? It's because of his, to take the name of a game, habit of victory. The fact that he just kept defeating coalition after coalition. Of course, the revolutionaries did too before him, but yeah, I mean, he just kept smacking Europe around, and it really wasn't until Russia and Spain that he ran into anything that could stop him. And then, of course, things went completely to shit. Those games also maybe have some, I don't know. Empires at Arms has reasons you attack Russia. I'm not sure this game or War and Peace really do. The automatic victory in this kind of makes it that way, as does the one in War and Peace. But those appear kind of impossible to achieve, right? So, I don't know. Anyway, let me do the hard work on that thing, I guess. I didn't find a third army, a third place I wanted to go to, essentially. I marched up into Wittenberg, took that, then marched down here, covering the woods to kind of cover Saxony better. I might have left something in Dresden against this, but it's only one step. So then I moved I moved a small force to take Thuringia. I moved Napoleon down to take Wurzburg to protect Bavaria from falling. But then I had one more army, and I swapped commanders. I put Napoleon in charge of the Army of the North, put the Army of Germany up here. With the extra army, sure, I could have gone down and attacked Prague. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I couldn't really get to that. Maybe I could have, I could have challenged Charles, with a lesser force. I want a big force under Napoleon to do that. So I just gathered my double army here instead. And I think that's it. Oh, it's kind of fatiguing. Yeah, I think we'll pause on that chit. It was a big, rich chit. There aren't going to be a lot of others. Not in winter with a forced march, but you know, I still am in the position where, okay, look, the Russian army has taken some hits. The Austrian army's taken some hits. The French, force marching with the French may not be so bad, although I have a lot of detachments to buy. And I will be getting the Young Guard available soon. Like, I just don't have a lot that I need to buy with the French is the problem. But if the French have too much money, they can start buying boats. So, I mean, they're never going to catch up with the Brits, but whatever. And yeah, I'm trying to think if anybody really wanted to do forced marches. The Turks wouldn't mind. Speaking of which, I ignored the Turks. This is not a supply source yet, so 1, 2, 3. We'll move them there. They are part of the coalition now. The Spaniards don't really want to. This probably, no, it had it last turn. Yeah. All right, and I guess I'm going to pause. This way I can check my messages and whatnot, because that's a complexity right now. Basically a whole bunch of chits pulled until the winter quarters comes up, and not a hell of a lot happened. I moved, you know, some Russians out of Prague to get them up closer to the line, but the disincentives that I feel for force marching, for pushing things, especially in winter, are just so high, and I couldn't come up with anything that it really felt like was worth that shot. That means, well, final attrition, I don't think we have anything, because we set up supply lines everywhere, and that means it's time to start worrying about the conquests. Now the biggie here was Bavaria didn't fall. Palatinate is part of Baden. Now, actually, Baden is part of France. So Palatinate is part of France now, which is why I have this marker. By the way, this marker is really annoying, but I get to get rid of it now because Romagna and Lombardy are both gone. So I get rid of that, and I look over here. I don't get rid of that, because only an Austrian surrender can get rid of those territories. Never mind. Now I do have to look at Kingdom of Italy's creation conditions, because I think some of these were control. No, it has to be a conquest of Lombardy to do it. I'm not sure if, like, Rhine they don't say, but it talks about conquest, but that's taking it out afterwards. But Berg is part of Bavaria. Thuringia is an actual location, and I can absorb it into France, which means, let's see what we got. Saxony's been taken. Thuringia's been taken. Württemberg, I think we got knocked out of Württemberg, and the Austrians are sitting there. So Saxony and Thuringia. Well, Thuringia we can just capture and incorporate into France. Can we incorporate Saxony is the question. I always have to check this shit out. They also seem to always go in the wrong direction. It has been conquered, but it may not be able, it may have to be reinstated. If it's adjacent to the original national territory which can annex it, is the only reason that one with troops could be reintegrated, which means that I do believe Saxony, if I find it, actually becomes a French ally. I don't think it becomes a go back to the alliance rules. A satellite has to be minor and announced at the beginning of the conquest phase, so I can't do it now. I could do it next year and make it into a satellite, but right now it is able to be swayed. Now, in order to understand what's going on with that, though, Saxony swings over to pro-French. If it had troops on the board, I think they'd be destroyed. Thuringia we have a chit for, so we don't actually need it. We don't need a chit there. Think. Anything else going over? Palatinate can't be taken from France because it's part of their home country right now. So I think that's it for conquest. I don't see anybody who's going to cut a deal or anything in the by surrendering, using a free diplomacy type thing. Algeria is the other one. That is taken from Spain because it's winter and given to Turkey. And this is a big deal because Spain and Turkey are not going to be at war very shortly after this. I should have these markers out of there. Spanish had an out of supply guy. Let's take care of that. Want to know what's crazy? Remember it said at the beginning of the conquest phase, over here in the actual sequence of play that's on the back of the book, you conquer the minor powers. That would be the first thing you do, blah, blah, blah. At the very end, the last thing before end of foreign wars is creation of satellites. I think I prefer the idea that you can't turn something into a satellite right away. But it's like, yeah, they're just in contradiction with each other. I'll play it the way I'm doing right now, unless I decide otherwise. But as far as I see, that is the end of 1807. That puts us to 1808. Since the beginning of the new year, put my chits here, or my dice there, and load this up. I may come up and play more. I'm not under the same time constraint anymore, but the thing is, like, I'll probably be getting some playing time in tomorrow too, because I no longer play Raid, so whatever happens, happens. All right, let's load this up. So I'm about to do that. I decided I'd pull the cards for this year that I'm going to add in. I didn't want to add them in, but I got like 6 cards for this year. What do we get? We get 2 for Britain, plus 4 other players brings us to 6, plus France, which can get like 3 or 4. I'm adding almost as many cards as I'm drawing from the deck. Again, it's just never, everything is a play once, essentially. I get the feeling that any cards that aren't play once are like, yeah, maybe it's possible you might have to reshuffle the deck, maybe, but don't count on it, man. Not that you put cards, not that you would be like playing cards to get them back in the deck, probably, because most of the ones that aren't play once are like, I don't know, they work for either side, so it's not like you're putting an advantage to yourself. I guess the Perfidious Albion if that's a, no, that's a play once. But on the other hand, I'm kind of just ignoring the cards and not fucking playing them. I know I have good ones in the French hand. I just haven't bothered. This could be useful, but it's not likely. The flank march, maybe, if I really want to capture someone. The Boulogne camp, this is a really powerful card. I don't know if I need it ever again. Like, it's kind of necessary for that Austerlitz situation. Treaty of Tilsit, definitely want to keep that in mind. This one could be useful. Ending a foreign war, sure. Barbary pirates, I don't know. Like, nobody's at sea, so kind of like, okay, I could pick off a British fleet, but why? It's not going to do me any good. I'm just not close enough anymore. Had I done it early, sure. And then all the other players, I don't know. I can't keep track of them all. They're all such low, low quality in terms of what they do. This is a huge card. Am I going to ever remember the Turks have it? But if I do, it's got to be a massively important battle to spend that card on, right? That's the whole thing, is like, the cards, you don't have a lot of them. Most of them don't do shit. And the few that do, you really want to hold, like the Boulogne camp, for when you absolutely want, absolutely can gain an advantage from them. The Art of War one, yeah, that's a big bonus to throw in. Turkey's obviously not going to do it in the fights here. Got a little confused because I had an Algerian unit here. That was from an Honors of War. It got destroyed and put over here. Let's get back to, let's load this up, because I could talk forever about shit, apparently.